My dad shoved my 9-year-old daughter at Christmas dinner. That seat's for my real grandchild. Move! She fell to the floor in front of everyone, but no one said a word. I didn't cry. I spoke 4 words. My mom dropped her wine. My dad turned pale. I can still feel the cold hardwood against my daughter's knee. The sickening thud of a 9-year-old hitting the floor, shoved by her own grandfather. Then, the silence. A silence so heavy, so profound, it stole the air from my lungs and left only his words ringing in my ears. That seat is for my real grandkid. Get out. In that shattering moment, I knew everything had to change. That Christmas dinner was the final splinter in a heart already scarred. But to understand why it broke me so completely, you need to know this isn't where their attempts to shatter me began. Hi, I'm Leah, a single mom. And that title means I've mastered a few things, mainly pretending I'm perfectly fine and somehow always carrying too much in one trip, both literally and emotionally. For years, I truly believed I could survive my family by just staying small enough, smiling enough, apologizing for taking up any space at all. But every Christmas Eve at my parents' house was this brutal, annual reminder that even small was still too much if the wrong person decided you didn't belong. The dining room was a battleground, caught somewhere between a Pottery Barn catalog and a chaotic nutcracker convention. Garland draped every surface, and candles burned with that sickly sweet winter pine scent, which, let's be honest, is just a polite lie for tree sap and unspoken resentment. My sister, Chelsea, had, of course, insisted on matching sweaters. Hers was effortlessly chic, like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Mine looked like I'd lost a very public, very unflattering bet. Maisie, my daughter, just kept tugging the too long sleeves of her sweater down over her hands. She was 9, and the sweater was clearly meant for a child Chelsea had sweetly described as a petite angel. Translation, definitely not my spirited, perfectly average-sized kid. At the head of the table, my dad held court, as always. His fork was his scepter, his booming laugh too big, too loud, and frankly, far too pleased with itself. Chelsea's daughter, Poppy, was perched in the seat closest to him. You know the one. That single, coveted spot everyone treated like holy ground, the one that always got the best plate, the first refill, the seat that somehow belonged to family more than the rest of us did. Poppy's 5, all blonde curls, enormous eyes, and a terrifying, innate talent for getting whatever she wanted with a single, perfectly practiced sigh. Everyone called her Grandpa's girl, like it was some title you could win, a crown you could wear. Maisie, quiet and observant, watched all of it with the careful, world-weary gaze of a child who's learned to read rooms before she can read books. It makes you proud, and it breaks your heart, all at the same time. Dad's mood had been festive that night, which is the politest way I can describe his particular brand of passive-aggressive cheer. When I first walked in, he'd already delivered one of his little zingers. Well, look who made it, he drawled, as if I'd crashed a party I wasn't invited to. I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when you're trained. Smile. Make it easy. Don't give him a reason. Then, at dinner, the jokes started. Blood's thicker than eggnog, he announced, lifting his glass towards Chelsea, like they were sharing some private, hilarious punchline. Chelsea laughed a little too hard. My mom laughed a little too quietly. Aunt Linda cackled like she was being paid by the chuckle. Maisie didn't laugh. She just kept her hands folded in her lap, like she'd learned that laughter could be used against you, too. I clocked it, swallowed it, and kept my eyes fixed on my daughter. And then, because my family loves tradition, we reached the part where everyone pretends it's normal. Maisie, clutching her glitter-covered paper place card, Chelsea had made them, of course, stood up and walked towards the table. She had this small, hopeful smile on her face. She wasn't trying to steal anyone's crown. She just wanted to sit down. She wanted to be included, like kids do, before the world teaches them that belonging is something you have to earn. She got close to the special seat, not even because she wanted it, but because Chelsea had, in a darkly ironic twist of fate, put her card right there. The universe, it seemed, had a wicked sense of timing. Dad saw the card, saw Maisie's small hand reaching for the chair, and something in his face just snapped. That seat is for my real grandkid, he barked. Maisie froze. The hopeful smile fell off her face so fast, it was like someone had yanked a string. Get out, Dad added, as if my 9-year-old had tried to rob him. And then he shoved her. Not a gentle nudge, not a move along. It was a shove, a grown man's hand on a child's shoulder, pushing her back like she was an obstacle to be removed. Maisie stumbled. Her foot caught the rug. Her knee hit the hardwood with a sickening crack that made my stomach lurch. And then, silence. Forks paused midair. A dropped napkin fluttered to the floor. Aunt Linda made a tiny, hushed "oh," as if Maisie had spilled a drink, not been violently pushed to the ground. Chelsea didn't move. She just stared, like this was a scene in a show she hadn't asked to watch, but might still enjoy. My mom's face went blank. Practiced. Like she'd been training for this exact moment her entire life. My My daughter looked up at me, not crying yet, just confused, her brain unable to compute the math of what had just happened. I was already moving before I even realized I was moving. I knelt down and helped her up. Her body was tense, vibrating with shock. Her knee was already blossoming red. Her breath hitched in tiny, broken bursts. Her small fingers latched onto my sleeve like she needed something, anything, solid. I glanced around the table. 20-some people. Adults. Family. Witnesses. Not one person stood up. Not one person said, "What the hell is wrong with you?" Not one person reached out a hand towards my daughter. Not even my mother. My ears rang. My vision tunneled. And then, in the middle of that deafening ringing, a single thought landed in my head with perfect, icy clarity. This ends. I leaned down close to Maisie and murmured, "I've got you." Because I needed her to hear at least one adult in that room say something true. Then, with my free hand, I reached into my bag. I didn't make a speech. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't wait for anyone to suddenly grow a spine. I pulled out a folder and set it on the table in front of my parents, right between the cranberry sauce and the lifetime of lies they'd been feeding me. I looked at my dad, then my mom, and I said 4 words, "You've been served." For a split second, nobody moved. Not even my father. Then, his hand went to the folder, like it belonged to him, the same way everything else in that house always did. He flipped it open. His eyes scanned the first page. My mother was still holding her wine glass, frozen halfway between the table and her mouth, as if time itself might pause if she didn't blink. Then my father's face drained of color, and my mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, hitting the table with a sharp, ugly clink before tipping over. My father wasn't angry pale. Not "how dare you" pale. This was the pale of recognition, the pale of fear. Then I walked out with my daughter, and behind me, for the first time all night, the silence finally broke. Not with comfort, but with panic. To understand why I had that folder in my bag, you need to understand what my life had looked like in their house. Because people love to ask questions like, "Why didn't you just cut them off?" As if family is a light switch. As if you can just flick it off and walk away without hearing their voices in your head for the next decade. Growing up, my sister Chelsea was sunlight. I was weather. Chelsea got praised. I got corrected. Chelsea got, "You're such a star." I got, "Don't be so sensitive." Chelsea got, "Come sit by me." I got, "Move. You're in the way." My dad's favorite trick was saying the cruel thing like it was a joke. Like if he smiled while he said it, it didn't count. "Where'd you get that hair?" he'd say when I was a teenager. "Must have been the mailman." Everyone would laugh, the way people laugh when they're terrified of being the next target. Mom would give me that look that meant, "Don't start. Don't make this worse. Don't ruin dinner." Chelsea became the proof my dad wanted. Proof the marriage was fine. Proof he wasn't being played. Proof he was the kind of man who could produce a real daughter. I became the question mark. My dad never got a test. That would have required admitting he might be wrong. Much easier to punish me for the suspicion and call it righteousness. And my mother? My mother let him. That's the part people don't understand until they've lived it. A father can be cruel because he's cruel. A mother has to decide, over and over, to watch it happen. My grandfather, my dad's father, was the only person on that side of the family who ever made me feel like I belonged. He wasn't exactly warm. He was one of those old school men who thought emotions were for people who didn't have work to do. But he'd pat my shoulder and say, "You're smart. Don't let anyone dull that." He'd slip me a card on my birthday with a crisp bill inside and tell Chelsea, loudly, to stop spending money like it was a hobby. When he died, the house shifted. Not with grief, but with ownership. Dad became in charge of everything: papers, accounts, decisions. I was told, very casually, that there wasn't anything set aside for me. That's the phrase Mom used, like she was talking about leftovers. There wasn't anything set aside, she said, eyes on the kitchen counter, voice flat, like she was reading from a script. I believed her. Or I tried to, because the alternative was admitting that my parents could look at me and decide I wasn't worth honesty. And that was a truth too devastating to face. And then, 2 weeks before this Christmas, I babysat Poppy, the golden grandchild. The one who gets the seat, the first cookie, the special plate. Chelsea had texted me, "Can you watch Poppy for an hour? I have a work call." A work call? Sure. Chelsea works from home in the same way I do yoga when I stretch for the remote. I said yes, because Poppy is 5 and she likes me in the way kids like adults who don't make them audition for affection. Also, because I'm still infected with that old family disease, maybe if I'm useful, they'll treat me better. Chelsea left. The house was quiet. Poppy played with dolls. I started cleaning up wrapping paper, because apparently Apparently, my role in that family was helper, not person. Chelsea's laptop sat closed on the coffee table, asleep, innocent, not my business. Poppy, however, saw it like a shiny, forbidden toy. She flipped it open like she'd done it 100 times before. The screen glowed. A password box popped up, and Poppy, tiny fingers, serious face, typed the password like it was her own name, like it was a game. I froze. Kids don't know passwords unless someone lets them. I walked over and said gently, "Hey, sweet pea, that's not a toy." I reached to close it, and that's when the laptop woke up fully. A PDF popped back onto the screen, like the computer had been holding its breath, and right at the top, in bold letters, was my grandfather's name. I stopped breathing. I sat down. Not because I was being nosy, but because my body understood something before my brain did. This matters. I skimmed fast and focused, the way you read when you're afraid of what you'll find, but more afraid of what you already suspect. There were headings, official-looking ones, trust, beneficiaries. My throat tightened, and then I saw it. My full legal name. Not a nickname. Not Leah, maybe. Not other child. My name, printed clean, undeniable. I scrolled again, carefully, like if I moved too fast, the truth would disappear. A page titled Distribution Summary was half visible. One line jumped out at me because it had a date I remembered in my bones. The month I'd asked for help with a deposit on a safer apartment after a break-in. The month Dad had laughed and said, "You should have made better choices." The month Mom had shrugged and said, "We can't." That same month, Chelsea had suddenly announced she was so blessed and bought a brand new SUV. I stared at that line until the numbers blurred. Then I did the only smart thing I've ever learned to do in that family. I took a photo. Just one. Clear. Trust name. My name. The part that mattered. I closed the laptop. Poppy asked if she could watch cartoons. I smiled at her like my world hadn't just tilted. "Yes, honey," I said. "Pick one. By the way, if you're still with me, still wondering what exactly was in that folder, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button." There are more unbelievable stories where this one came from. That night, after Chelsea came home and chirped, "Everything fine?" I said, "Yes," because I needed time, and because confronting people like my parents without a plan is like walking into a hurricane with an umbrella. 2 days later, I sat across from a woman named Rebecca Shaw in a small law office that smelled like coffee and competence. I slid my phone across the desk. Rebecca studied the photo for all of 5 seconds before her expression changed. Not shock, not confusion, recognition. The kind of look you give when you've seen this pattern before. "If your name is on it," she said, voice calm, "trustees don't get to decide, you don't count." I swallowed. Even if they think whatever they think," Rebecca cut in. "Ink beats opinions. I didn't call my parents. I didn't ask Chelsea. I didn't clear the air. I let Rebecca do what she does, quietly, and when Rebecca handed me a folder a few days later, I didn't open it in the parking lot like a movie character. I sat in my car and stared at it like it was a bomb. Because it was. Not the explosive kind, the life-changing kind. For days, that folder lived in my bag. I took it out, put it back, took it out, put it back. I told myself, after the holidays, not at Christmas, not in front of everyone. Don't be dramatic. Don't ruin things. I told myself I could get through one more dinner. I told myself I could keep the peace. And then my father put his hands on my child, and waiting stopped being a choice. Maisie was quiet in the car, not the normal quiet where she's plotting how to convince me that dessert counts as a food group. This was the kind of quiet that scares you as a parent, because you can hear your child's little brain trying to build meaning around something that should never have happened. Her knee was starting to puff up. She sniffed hard, like she was trying not to cry, like crying would make her a problem. I hated them for that, for teaching her that. I kept my voice gentle. "Hey, look at me. You didn't do anything wrong." She stared out the window. He doesn't like me." My throat tightened. "That's about him, baby, not you." Maisie's voice got even smaller. "Is it because I'm not real?" There it was. The poison. Passed down like an heirloom. I pulled the car over for a second because I needed my hands steady. "No," I said, and I made the word a wall. "You are real. You belong with me, always." She nodded, like she wanted to believe me, like belief was a thing she had to earn. I drove the rest of the way home with my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Now, because I know some of you are already asking, what was in the folder? Here it is. The payoff. The thing I didn't explain at the table, because my family doesn't deserve speeches. That folder wasn't a threat. It was a legal service. It was a court petition to force a full accounting of my grandfather's trust. Every dollar in, every dollar out, every signature, every transfer. It asked the court to freeze further distributions until the truth was on paper, where nobody could forget it. It asked to remove my parents as the people controlling it, because what I'd found wasn't confusion. It was diversion. It included exhibits, my name on the trust, the distribution lines that matched the sudden miracles in Chelsea's life, and the trust administrator information so nobody could pretend it was fake. And that cover page? That's why my father went pale. Because he recognized it. Because he knew exactly what he'd been doing. Because he knew I wasn't guessing. I was done. My phone started ringing before I even pulled into my driveway. Chelsea first, then Mom, then Dad, over and over. Chelsea left a voicemail that was half rage, half panic. What did you do? Are you insane? You're ruining everything. Mom's voicemail was a sobbing whisper. Leah, please, please don't do this. Think about. As if I hadn't been thinking about my child's knee hitting hardwood. Dad's voicemail was cold. No yelling. No theatrics. Just this. You're not taking anything from this family. I didn't call back. I got Maisie settled on the couch in her leggings and an old hoodie, pressed an ice pack to her knee, and made cocoa with extra marshmallows, because sometimes parenting is just knowing when to add sugar to pain. We watched a Christmas movie, Maisie tucked against my side like she was afraid the world might shove her again if she moved. My phone kept buzzing. The family group chat exploded. Aunt Linda, how could you do this on Christmas? A cousin I barely spoke to. I saw what happened. Are you okay? Finally, a real question. Chelsea posting pictures of Poppy sitting in the special seat, with a caption like it was cute, like it was normal. And then the smear campaign started. Chelsea posted on Facebook, some people will destroy a family for money. No names, just enough for everyone to point. People reacted with little heart emojis, like betrayal was inspirational content. My aunt messaged me, you've always been dramatic, Leah. My uncle wrote, call your father and apologize. Nobody wrote, is Maisie okay? That told me everything I needed to know about the family I'd been trying to keep. Then my dad sent one text that was meant to scare me into silence. A message that had been sitting in his back pocket my whole life, waiting for a moment where it would hurt the most. You want court? Fine. Tell the judge why you should be getting my father's inheritance if you're not even mine. My stomach flipped. Not because I believed him, but because I knew what he was trying to do. He wasn't defending money. He was defending his right to punish. And he was going to try and drag my daughter into it, too. I stared at the text until my hands stopped shaking. Then I looked down at Maisie, asleep on the couch, and I whispered to her and to myself, he doesn't get to write our story anymore. 2 days after Christmas, Rebecca Shaw forwarded me a PDF titled Response Plus Motion. Nothing like opening your inbox and finding a document that sounds like a sci-fi sequel. Response 2, Motion Harder. I was standing in my kitchen in yesterday's sweatshirt, watching Maisie eat cereal like nothing in the world had happened, because that's what kids do when they're trying to be brave. She was 9. She wasn't crying anymore. She was doing that quiet thing where children decide emotions are dangerous because adults act like they are. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca texted, open it. Call me when you're on page 2. Page 2 was where they went for my throat. Not just the real grandchildren nonsense, though yes, that was there, bolded like a slogan on a billboard. They were asking the court to dismiss my petition and sanction me for bad faith and harassment. Sanction. Like I was a misbehaving dog. I could practically hear my father narrating. See? Even the judge thinks you're dramatic. My stomach dropped so hard I had to lean on the counter. Rebecca called before I could. They're going to try to make this about whether you're real family, she said, her voice calm in that way people are calm when they've seen this movie and already know the ending. Don't take the bait. My throat tightened. They're really doing this? They're desperate, she said. Desperate people throw sand. I swallowed. If he says I'm not his, should we do a test? There was a pause, just long enough for my shame to try and crawl up my neck. Then Rebecca said, flatly, not for court. Not for them. Your name is on the trust. Trustees don't get to rewrite it based on suspicion. I stared at Maisie, who was carefully lining up her spoon and bowl, like she could make the morning behave if she made the objects behave. I don't know if I wanted the truth, I said quietly. Rebecca had me come in that afternoon. She slid a printout towards me. Initial snapshot from the trust administrator, she said. I read the top line and my ears went hot. Didn't make it a moment. I swabbed, sealed, and shoved it back into the mail like I was returning something that never should have been sent. Then came the waiting. You'd think waiting would be calm after court. It wasn't. Every day I checked for updates like a compulsive habit. Every day I told myself it didn't matter. Every day, it mattered anyway. Maisie kept processing in her own quiet way. The first few nights she hovered near me, like she was bracing for another shove from the universe. Then one evening, as I tucked her in, she said very casually, I don't want to go there again. No tremble. No question. A decision. And something in my chest cracked open. Pride, grief, relief, all stacked together. together. The email came on a Tuesday, because life loves dropping grenades into ordinary days. I opened it alone at my kitchen counter. Read it once, twice, 3 times, like the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. Biological match. I'm his daughter. My first feeling wasn't relief. It was fury. Fury so clean it made me cold, because it meant the suspicion was wrong, and the cruelty was still deliberate. It meant they could have ended this years ago with 1 test and 1 ounce of decency. They didn't want clarity. They wanted a license. So I sent the results to both of them. No long message. No explanation. No invitation to respond. Just, you built my whole life around a lie. Here's the truth. Then I blocked them. And I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing there alone, hands clasped, like she was about to ask for forgiveness the way you ask for a favor. Maisie was at school. Thank God. I opened the door just enough to make it clear I was listening, not welcoming. My mother's eyes were swollen. Not in a dramatic way, but in a tired way, like she'd been crying at the mirror and losing. She didn't start with, "I'm sorry." She started with strategy. "Your father, he's been different," she said. "He asked about Maisie." I said nothing. "He wants to see her," she rushed on. "He wants to be a family, now that we know. Now that we know. Like love is a subscription that activates when the lab confirms you qualify." Then she finally cracked, and the truth came out in the only way it ever comes out after years of silence, messy and too late. "Before you were born," she said, voice shaking, "I slept with someone else. Just once. Your father found out. Or he suspected. Honestly, I don't even remember which came first anymore. But from that moment on, he decided you might not be his. And I let him treat you like a question mark because I was guilty. I thought I deserved it. And somehow, you ended up paying for it instead. I thought I was doing what I had to do. And now we can fix it. We can be." I waited until she finished. Then I said quietly, "No." Her face tightened, like she didn't understand the language, so I made it plain. "It shouldn't have mattered," I told her. "You were my mother, whether I was his or not, and you chose him anyway." She tried to speak. I didn't let her. "My father doesn't get Maisie now because a test says real," I said. "You don't get to come back because the story is comfortable again." I told her the only thing she was leaving with was the knowledge that she'd been wrong. Then I closed the door. That night, Maisie asked me, steady and small, "We're not going back, right?" I sat beside her on the couch, close enough that she didn't have to be brave alone. "No," I said. "We're not." And this time, it wasn't a promise. It was a boundary. For months later, the money hit my account. All of it. They sold the house. The one they'd owned outright. The one my father used to call his legacy. Turns out, legacy doesn't mean much when a judge orders restitution and interest and fees, and there's nowhere else to pull from. The sale covered it. Every dollar that was taken. Every dollar the court added on top. When the wire cleared, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I paid off what I needed, set up Maisie's future, and closed the door on the rest. They're broke now. Not we need to budget broke. Downsized. Borrowed. Quiet broke. The kind of broke where relatives stop calling and excuses stop working. We're no contact. Not the dramatic kind. The peaceful kind. Maisie laughs more. She sleeps through the night. She doesn't ask about real anymore. She knows where she belongs. I don't flinch when my phone buzzes. I don't brace myself at holidays. Our life is smaller, and somehow, so much bigger. They lost their money. They lost their story. They lost control. And I got my life back. So, what do you think? Did I go too far, or not far enough? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories.